Hello and welcome. My name is Adam Wlęgała and today I am going to review PTS 2000, a perimeter from Optopol. This machine can easily be combined with the Optopol's Revo OCT, but also offers some very interesting features like kinetic testing and also the ability to superimpose Fundus Photo on the perimeter results. So please watch with me a review of PTS 2000.
This is how PTS 2000 looks in reality. There is a computer next to the machine which has a touchscreen display. We also have patient's button and that can be stored on the backside of the machine. You have also the trial frame where you can put the lenses, and there are two spots, one for the cylinder and another for the sphere. And then in the back side you have the switch on power cord, and also on the left side you have the holder. A question that people often ask is, how can you have this blue LED around the machine and still be able to perform the test? Well, here's the answer. This machine can actually auto-regulate the intensity of the illumination based on the illumination of the surrounding area. So when we switch off the ambient light of the room, then the machine lights on. The blue light itself gives you this ambient light, so on the one hand the patient doesn't bump into chairs or other machines, and also it's easy to say, hey, please sit down in front of the machine with the blue light. This is how the database looks like. If you put one letter to the search, then you will have all the names of the patients beginning with that letter. What I like is that if you click on the patient, you will see the grayscale miniature of the patient's past examination displayed. So this is quite useful if you're just not sure if the patient is the right patient and you remember his defect, then this is what you will see before opening whole examination. You can obviously add the patient. There is a refractive data to put in because based on the values and DH, the machine will suggest proper spherical correction for that patient for the perimetry. Next, we can select a test program. We can naturally customize this window by adding the most commonly used test or delete less common. So let's look at the test we have here. So let's start with the macular tests. Here we have 10-2 or 5-2, so either radial or orthogonal tests. Next we have the central field. So let's look at the 24-2C. So this is a classic 24-2, but here we have 10 additional points within the macula, which makes it more accurate for the changes. Next we have G50 orthogonal test and radial. These are basically nasally extended tests so that it's much easier to detect changes like the nasal step. Next we have C22. This is the central field but extended both temporally and nasally. Then we have the C24A. This is the variation of the 24-2, but here this is the radial test, so you have higher density of the points when you come to the center. So it is much better than the traditional 24-2. However, this is the most commonly used test. Then again, we have C-38. This is the equivalent in radial scale of the 30-2. Then we have C-76. This is more or less 30-2. Then 30-2C. This is the 30-2 plus 10 additional points within the center. Much more sensitive again than standard 30-2. Then you have the G1 from the octopus. And this is the equivalent of 24-2 for octopus. But here, this field is more accurately depicting the RNFL layout on the retina. So again, this is going to be much better and more accurate than standard 24-2. And then one of my favorite tests, so G028 and G0
-2. This is just for fast screening. So you have few points that are basically put where you have the most likely damage of the RNFL. So this allows you to have a 1 minute glaucoma screening test using those two tests. Then we have central 40, central 64, central 80. These are Humphrey tests. Then again, we have the Armali-C. This is also extended to the nasal, so it's like the G-50. And last, we have the N1, so neurological, and N2, which is neurological, plus it's also extended temporally. If you want to test peripheral vision, you also have several tests to do it. So you have F50. If you use threshold test strategy, then it will take like 15 minutes for one eye. So I certainly do not recommend that. But depending on number of points, you can choose between P50, which is much faster, to FF246, depending on where you think there is defect. We also have full tests. The most common and the most famous one is Easterman B. This is I think the widest. And then we have the tests specific for the country. So FEV, G1, G2, these are German tests specifically for drivers or for pilots, I guess. Gandolfo, it's the Italian one. And then depending on the number of dots, and this is what the specific country used. We also have the binocular single vision. So these are basically very interesting tests, and I think the PTS is the only machine that has them. This is the tests for diplopia. So it's nice. I'll show you the results of the BSV. Next, we have the extended field. The Esterman FFV, I've already talked about. BSV, the diplopia. So you can have multiple tests in different categories. We also have a special category. So here we have ptosis tests, so superior 64, 36 and 44, depending on the number of points. This is to monitor the ptosis. We have also here the binocular single vision, but also visual field to monitor the nasal step. Again, Easterman, Gandolfo, N1 and the German test as well. And the last three categories that we have are the HFA, so the Humphrey test. Then we have the Octopus test and specific PTS, specific tests for the PTS 2000. So all the tests that I showed you are customizable. So let's start with the strategies. And here you have three types of strategies to choose from. So firstly, you have the threshold. There is this tiny little T next to the clock. So these are threshold tests ranked from the slowest to the fastest. So Zeta and Zeta fast, these are equivalent of Zeta on Humphrey. Then you have the screening tests. So these are the tiny S. So then here you have screening, 3-zone, 2-zone, and then you have the special strategies like the flicker strategy or BDT strategy. Naturally, not for every test you can have different strategies. So this is for 24-2C. If you've chosen 24-2, then you could also use advanced or top strategies, which are still threshold strategies. We can also change the stimulus color, stimulus size, but also reliability test and the gaze tracker sensitivity. We have 3 levels of gaze tracker. So the lowest one is basically the machine just registers the eye movement, does nothing. The highest one is the machine registers. Then in cases of fixation loss, it will stop the test and then it will repeat. Finally, the machine will also instruct the patient to fixate. We can also predefine the kinetic testing. If you wish, you can have special tests for different type of patients. So yes, you can do it here. And in the end, if you've created this type of program, you can add it here as well. So when we've already done doing the customization and we are sure which type of test, we can do it. So that's what you see when you start. There is the screen, there is the camera, and you can choose which eye do you want. So firstly, you need to add the refraction, and the machine has, as I mentioned, the calculator that based on age and the refractive error will suggest a lens to be used during the test.
An interesting feature is if you are using those full field tests, firstly you will have you will need to use trial lens for the center, and then for the periphery you need to close the lens, right? So remove the trial frame, and then the machine will test the periphery. And we can actually start the examination. We can have the voice guide in multiple languages. We can switch it off if we don't want to have this, but it's extremely useful because if you have firstly a patient who doesn't speak your language, then you can still have the examination. And secondly, if you have to talk to patient the whole day, then this might be also a very nice feature. The machine will give instructions to the patient.
Punkte werden Sie nicht sehen können, weil sie zu dunkel sind.
And we'll also direct the patient if the patient doesn't fixate.
Por favor, mire hacia la luz roja.
Another nice feature is the demo mode. So before you start the exam, in cases of patients who have never been tested, then they can have like 30 seconds mock exam with the instruction read by the machine, and also they will be directed how to look so that the real examination will not be unreliable. So when the real test is on, then this is what you can see. You have the direct visualization of both the eye and the test results that the patient has. In cases when you see that there might be some reason why the patient didn't see or was not really fixating, then you can retest a specific field, which is very useful because you can imagine that this quite often happens, and then the whole test will be basically useless. If you retest the specific site that you suspect patient wasn't paying attention or was distracted, you can still salvage this visual field. We can view directly the results on the machine, and this is the result display. We have 4 different subscreens, and we can change the view on the subscreens. So we can have the row, so this is basically the sensitivity. We can have deviation from the hill of vision. So this is more or less like the adjusted to the patient's sensitivity. So if you have, let's say, a patient who have cataract and they have generalized depression of the height of vision, in order to see some defects, you would likely use this type because then you will see only the highlighted defects and not generalized defect. Next we have the total deviation. This is basically the deviation from the age group. Then we have probability of total deviation. This is the probability, so percentage-wise statistic analysis of those changes that we saw on the total deviation. Next we have the pattern deviation, like the height of vision deviation. This is also deviation adjusted to the patient, known from Humphrey. And then you have the probability of pattern deviation. Next we have the Bezier curve. This is the cumulative plot that depicts the ranking of the defects. And it's also age matched, so you have this corridor, this white corridor. It shows you the progression of defects in a normal population. So in this case, the patient has glaucoma, so you see it. If the patient has, for instance, cataract, and there is a generalized loss of sensitivity, so these should also be parallel to the corridor, but it will be decreased. Then we have the sector analysis, the differences between inferior and superior sectors, the GHT. Next we have details, so the information about the test itself, like the date, the time, the duration, laterality, size of stimulus, but also the basic parameters like the MD, VQI, GHT, etc. So an interesting thing is that you can change the analysis indices based on how the Humphrey or Octopus is actually doing it. Conversely, you can use Optopol's own method. When you're done viewing the results on the machine, you can print them out, and there are several printout templates available. An amazing feature is if you have the Fundus camera with your Optopol Revo OCT, you can connect it to your PTS, and then you will have a Fundus Photo on the printout. If it's connected via LAN or internet, you can have it automatically added. And this is what you will see. So you have the Fundus Photo on the Perimetry as well. You can naturally change the printout, you can change what kind of PTS information you want to have, or you can choose HFA printout style. What is remarkable about this machine is that you can actually import the results from Humphrey or Medmont. So it's super easy. You just drag and drop tests from Humphrey, and here you are. You see that some of the tests are Zeta, so this is the Humphrey standard, and some are Zeta, so this is the PTS strategy. And obviously, visual field testing is all about progression and analyzing the past results. So here we can have results from different tests on also different machines, but also on different days, all together on one screen. And what a nice feature is, if you double click on particular screen, you can see the differences between tests on, let's say, pattern deviation, so you can scroll through them. So here we have the Bezier curve from different tests. We don't see any defects here. Everything is normal. We also have the VQI or VFI on Humphrey index, and this is basically the curve. And you can see that there is no difference between the parameters. There's also Brusini glaucoma staging system to plot. This is basically an interesting plot that shows you whether whole visual field defects are generalized, localized or mixed. And here we can see that in this patient, this is going to be more localized, and the progression is more into localized effects rather than the generalized. This machine allows you also to do the kinetic testing, and there are basically two ways to do it. So one is the automatic, the other one is the old school Goldman manual. When we do automatic, we have two modes. One mode is the manual, the other one is predefined. In manual mode, you draw the vectors and then the machine will do it automatically. So we have three different drawing modes. There is the manual mode, which you basically write the different path. We can have the second mode, which you just put the start point of the vector. And then we have the third mode, which is the opposite. So basically you put the one start point and then you put multiple endpoints around it. So you can test from the center to periphery. But there is more modern way to do it. There are also predefined programs, so you can create them or you can use the ones that Optopol made. After we start doing the examination, either using the predefined or the manually defined nodes, the machine will do it automatically. And then create the isopteras and also measure the area of them. That is very useful for monitoring patients. For more traditional folks, there is also a super old school way to do it. So you don't have like automated kinetic perimetry, but you basically do it manually, fully. So without any predefined programs, you start and you basically draw a line while the machine does the testing simultaneously. The speed of testing can be determined by how fast you draw the line, but you also can have like a speed limit. So this will never be faster than 3 degrees or 5 degrees per second. So what happens if the patient comes for a follow-up? Do you need to still do the manual testing as with the first visit? No, you don't have to, because the machine will remember all these settings that you've done, and then you can just click retest, and this would be fully automated kinetic perimetry based on the pathways of the vectors that you used in your first visit. And this is basically the view. We can click the isopteras, which we wish to see, which we don't want to see. And then we have this table, which is very well known to all the people who used to do or are still doing Goldman kinetic perimetry. After we have finished with the testing, we can change the settings of the view. We can show fillings, we can show norms, we can draw isopters, we can also have the different colors of the isopters, we can change the colors as we wish, and then we can print the results out. In my opinion, the best functionality is the combination of Revo OCT with the PTS visual field testing. On a one screen, you can have all the information regarding the optic nerve head, plus the RNFL and GCL, and also the visual function test by the PTS, which is combined on the structure function graph. This combined with the Fundus Photo and the optic nerve head photo, plus the information on the RNFL and the fact that you can measure the angle and the AC depth on Revo, makes it a perfect combination for glaucoma specialists. So what are the upsides of PTS 2000? Well, firstly, that you have the access to both worlds, to HFA and to Octopus. That means that if you like G1, if you like 24-2, you can still have those tests on this machine. And this is very important if you have a clinic in which you have multiple specialists, and some people are more familiar with Humphrey, they can still have Humphrey test. Some people are more familiar with the Hackstrides, they can still have it. Plus, you also have PTS own tests like the diplopia tests. Secondly, you have this streamlined connectivity between the perimetry and the OCT. So if you have Revo, a natural companion is the PTS, because you can have Fundus photos on perimetry, or you can have perimetry on OCT, creating the structure and function views. This is highly useful. Naturally, there is a competitor called Zeiss Forum with Glaucoma Workspace, where you can combine the OCT with Fundus Photo from Clarus and then the HFA, but it's very expensive. So you have to buy licenses for each program. You have to buy licenses for different computers. Not to mention that Zeiss equipment is way more expensive than the Optopols. Speaking of the Humphrey, if you have Humphrey, you can have all your old records on PTS, so you can have patients coming for follow-up, and this is very useful and also convenient. Another great feature, as I showed you, is the kinetic testing. The fact that you can have this manual kinetic testing like in the old days. I know many people who are doing retina, especially the inherited retinal diseases, are still using the traditional Goldman. You don't have to do it. You can have the PTS. Another great feature is that you can use this machine itself to view the results. So you don't have to buy Revo to see the progression. You can change the settings here, unlike with Humphrey, where you only can print out or save as PDFs, and then you can view the results. Another great feature is that the machine talks to the patient. So if the patient loses fixation, then the machine will tell them immediately to start looking at the fixating light and not wander around. Or if the patient doesn't speak your language, you can still have the tests and choose from the most commonly used languages from the list, and then still conduct testing. So what are the downsides of PTS? Well, firstly, I would say it doesn't have the liquid lens. Liquid lens is something unique for Zeiss machine. This machine offers you a sort of like artificial lens that can automatically adjust to the patient's spherical error. So that means that it's able to go from +8 to -8 diopters, meaning that most of patients who are coming to you, you can test them without spending time on putting the lenses into trial frame. And naturally, if the patient comes for a follow-up, then the machine remembers the previous refraction and will automatically adjust. This is super feature for Humphrey, no doubts about that, but it's pricey. This is an add-on and you need to pay a lot of money, like with all the features that a company from Jena offers. Additionally, we don't have the MD and PSD adjusted to the normal population. So you do not have the probability index associated with those two values. A minor issue is the blue light. I think it's a nice feature, no doubts about that, having this background illumination that allows patients to see slightly in otherwise dark environment. It's a nice feature, but usually we have our visual fields next to pentacam because they both require darkness. Here, this wouldn't be possible. You cannot have pentacam next to something that emits blue light. But on the other side, patients really like this feature. They think it's an expensive device. I once had a patient who went through all of our imaging devices, including Optos Silverstone, that cost 400,000 euros. And then in the end, I asked the patient, which of the devices you went through do you think it's the most expensive? And the patient said, oh, the one with the blue LED. So, if you're in a private setting and you really care about the design, this might also be an interesting argument for buying this machine. Another problem is that if you are very focused on clinical trials, then you probably would be better off buying HFA, because HFA is the most commonly used perimeter in clinical trials, and most of the reading centers insist on having HFA results. The same story goes for science and research. If you want to do research, you should rather stick to HFA. But let's face this, most of users, they just want a functional machine that gives you reliable and repeatable results, plus that's easy to use, and also that you get the highest quality for the lowest paid price. And for them, PTS is the optimal choice. Plus you have all these nice features like the ability to combine the Fundus Photo, the ability to combine it with the OCT, and the fact that it has so many different testing strategies makes it a perfect machine for testing visual field.
Thank you very much for watching my review. Please subscribe to my channel and goodbye.